Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the news briefing this Wednesday, September 3rd. We are starting this week's briefing with an update on the battery removal process at the Vistra Moss Landing facility. We're very pleased to have two people here to talk about this. We have Kazami Brockman. He is the on-scene coordinator, EPA Region 9, and Dave Yeager, who's the director of project development at Vistra. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Kazami, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Just to confirm, do you hear me?
I can.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Hello again. My name is Kazami Brockman. I'm an on-scene coordinator with EPA Region 9 Emergency Response Program. Thank you for having us again here today. And today I'll be giving an update on the battery removal process. This includes the process of removing the batteries from the building, inspecting and treating them on site, and then transporting them to the recycler. So as I've covered in previous briefings, over the past few weeks, Vistra has been conducting some stabilization and partial demolition activities to clear access to certain key areas of the building to clear the way for this work to move forward. So over the next few weeks, workers will be entering the newly accessible areas to further assess the batteries and conduct hands-on training on the procedures. And then we will start the full-scale process of treatment, which is discharge on site, de-energization on site, and packaging for treatment to the recycler. I'll also discuss our top priority throughout these operations, which continue to be worker and community safety, and the measures we're putting into place to ensure that both are protected. So crews finished delinking all the currently accessible batteries in mid-March, which greatly reduced the risk of thermal runaway events and further incidents. But as I've mentioned in previous briefings, batteries can be unstable, damaged batteries can be unstable, and we're focused on removing the batteries from the building and sending them for disposal and recycling in a safe and quick way as possible. So additionally, along with the partial demolition work that Vistra has been doing, Vistra is removing a section of asbestos-containing building material from one of the walls, which will address the bulk of asbestos remaining at the burned building. And California certified asbestos consultants will remain on the project to inspect and sample potential asbestos-containing material as the project moves forward into demolition. That material is being packaged and sent to an approved disposal facility at Hay Road Landfill in Vacaville, California. Once the structural engineers on site deem the building safe for crews to enter, each battery module will be inspected, carefully removed from its rack, cleaned, and placed on pallets for treatment. This process is meant to be continuous. Once batteries are removed from the building, they will be inspected and treated on site. It's our goal to ensure that each battery is dealt with as quickly as possible for both the safety of the workers and the community and to maintain the speed of the operations. A battery handling area was constructed at the site, and it consists of a paved surface and a sealed water collection area to control and store all runoff from any runoff that may happen as we get into the rainy season, and that water will be sampled. At the battery handling area, batteries staged on pallets will be connected to electrical equipment called load banks to offload their energy and send it back to the grid. The pallets will be staged in a configuration that allows firefighters to efficiently access any pallet, and North County Fire has been on site to advise on the setup of the handling area. And just to provide some additional detail on the safety protocols, damaged batteries may be unstable, and the most effective ways to mitigate the risk of fire are de-energization discharge, which is our on-site treatment method, and to stage them in smaller quantities to prevent the spread of fire to other batteries. And so staging of the batteries on pallets and discharging them at our treatment area get at these two mitigation methods. Vistra also has created a battery isolation box that may be placed over a pallet in certain situations to help contain and cool down the batteries. And while battery handling work is going on, EPA will continue to oversee air monitoring and air sampling 24/7 until EPA determines that there is no longer a risk to human health and the environment from the damaged batteries. This system has been active and expanded since the January fire and continues to show no exceedances of standards at the perimeter and in the community. Thermal cameras will be used to detect a rise in temperature in the batteries that could be an early indicator of risk or an issue. Vistra's private firefighting crew continues to conduct walkthroughs of accessible areas in the building and has not reported any issues. So all of these measures are out of an abundance of caution. EPA oversight is focused on both prevention of incidents as well as on response strategies should an incident occur. EPA has approved the recycler, American Battery Technology Company. They have a battery recycling facility in McCarran, Nevada for this project. Under a legal authority called the offsite rule, Vistra cannot send certain waste to a facility unless it is approved by EPA. So EPA reviews the compliance history of a proposed facility and determines whether the facility is acceptable for receiving the waste, and usually this includes an inspection. So as the project moves forward, more disposal and or recycling facilities may be proposed by Vistra, and EPA will continue to review them for approval as appropriate. Once battery transport begins, we anticipate 2 trucks with battery material with batteries will leave the site per day. And this is based on the capacity of the recycler to accept waste. And it also allows us to be very intentional with a focus on safety as we start this new phase of work. As mentioned on previous briefings, other trucks containing scrap metal from the stabilization and partial demolition work will continue to leave the site. I'd expect around 4 to 5 trucks per day in this phase of work as Vistra starts to clear away some of the electrical equipment that was located on the south side of the building. EPA continues to work on the community involvement plan and is in the process of finalizing it with Vistra. We expect to finalize the plan before battery removal begins. The plan will be made public on EPA's Moss Landing Vistra Battery Fire webpage. So that concludes my remarks. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak with you all today, and I'll hang around to answer any questions.
Kazami, thank you very much for that really thorough look at what is happening right now. I'd like to offer the floor to Dave Yeager from Vistra to share from Vistra anything that the public should be aware of. Hi, Dave.
Yeah, hi. No, thanks for allowing us to join you today. I'm here just to really answer some fielded questions, so no prepared remarks. So I'll be here for any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So folks can put questions in chat for our speakers. Kazami, let me ask you, are we still on track, given the update that you've provided, are we still on track for that year disposal, kind of completion, or has anything changed?
I would say previously I mentioned we expect this to take more than a year, at least a year. I think the process is still on track. We haven't seen any significant delays at this point.
Thank you. And I do have questions for you, and I'm going to break this as a multi-part question, so I'll break it up for you to make it easy. What date will battery removal begin? Do you have a date for that?
I would expect, as you talk about battery removal, I'm assuming you mean removal of batteries from the site for transportation.
Let's go with that.
Okay. I would expect that to start the week of September 22nd.
Okay. And then how long, if we start on the 22nd, the second part of this question is, how long would that take for the complete battery removal?
Yeah, good question. As I've kind of covered before, it's a phased approach. Currently, we're addressing a subset of batteries which are less damaged. A lot of them were not impacted directly by the fire, but were also at higher states of charge. And so this phase of work, I'm expecting to carry on for a few months. I'm thinking February. However, in this phased approach, with how complex the demolition process is and the interplay with the battery removal process, it's going to be, some battery removal, then some required activity of demolition, clearing areas to certain key locations that we need to access next. And so it's difficult to say at this point, since those phases will be in the future and depend on some additional activities.
Thank you. And then the last part of this question is, how many truckloads do you estimate will go to Nevada? You identified some trucks going to Vacaville and then others to this company approved vendor in Nevada.
I don't have an exact estimate at this point. Again, with the phased approach, I think there's some more complexity there as we think about our current phase versus the entirety of the project. Additionally, as the project moves forward, there may be additional battery recycling facilities identified. To clarify on the Vacaville trucks, those were a limited amount of asbestos-containing material heading up to that Hay Road landfill. And that's what I mentioned earlier about that targeted mitigation work on the bulk of the remaining asbestos at the building.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. So if residents are going to, if they begin to see trucks going, an increase in truck traffic around the site, I mean, that's, residents who live nearby are really keen on knowing what's happening up there. They should start to see more traffic going in and out around the 22nd.
So the Vistra conducted a traffic study of the area, and 2 trucks a day of batteries and a couple trucks from the demo work. We don't expect to be much of a noticeable difference on that road. But yes, the transport of batteries will be targeted for the week of the 22nd.
Thank you. And then another question for you. Should neighbors to the plant be concerned about rainwater runoff and potential pollution?
So the plant has a quite robust stormwater collection system at the site. I mentioned earlier that the battery handling area had an additional step put in of surface water collection from that battery handling area, but all rainwater or other water hitting the site will be collected at the site using that existing collection system.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for either of our speakers on this topic before we move on? I'm going to, yes.
Sorry, just to clarify on that last point, the collected water is then sampled for the disposal step.
Any other questions for either of our speakers on this topic? And I'm seeing none. If I do get additional questions after we have moved on, I will forward them to you both. Thank you both very much for being here to keep us updated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now moving on to our next topic, some major renovations are coming to the Greenfield branch of our county libraries. That means there will be a change to some services there, and we want to keep all of our patrons apprised. So we're very pleased to have Hillary Thayer, our Director of Library Services, to tell us what's happening in Greenfield. Hi, Hillary. We see you, but don't hear you. You're muted. There
Sorry
you go.
about that. Getting
Gotcha.
myself all oriented. I made a couple of slides just so that I would not have to repeat phone numbers and things like that over and over, and you would have them on your screen. So hopefully you can see my slides now. Is that
Sure.
correct?
We see you.
Excellent, excellent. So this is just a brief presentation to alert you first to the current project at Greenfield Library, and then some upcoming projects and all your options for library services in the meantime. So Greenfield branch is getting a new roof. We are very excited. We never like doing what we call the rain bucket dance, where you put buckets out in the middle of the library when it's raining and put up enough caution tape and cones that nobody trips over it. And we're very excited. It is going to be the same style of the roof currently on the building, which is one of those beautiful Spanish tile style buildings. The project date's starting next week, ending at the end of October. We do plan to have the library completely closed for the first week, and then we will assess after that, which means we make no promises. We may be completely closed for the entire project duration. Part of it, we may be able to open for a limited amount of time. We may be able to provide curbside. It may be day to day. So to serve the community while we're there, we have set up a few things. First is there'll be no book return available at the branch. The book return at that library is a slot in the wall of the branch, and it's a construction site. So we definitely don't want people walking up to the building where we're tearing off the roof and trying to return books. So just don't plan on returning your books. We do not charge overdue fines. If you have concerns, you can give us a call. You can return your items at any bookmobile stop, any other branch. This includes any branch in Monterey, any branch in Santa Cruz. You can return the books in Hollister. They will get home to us. The wireless will stay on. We anticipate regular hours for wireless internet, and it is quite strong. So if you can get anywhere near the library, such as the adjacent parcel called Hicks Park, you should be able to access wireless. The phones will be forwarded. So if people call the Greenfield Library, they're not going to get a busy signal or a voicemail that goes nowhere. Those phones will be answered by the Soledad Library. So don't be surprised if they answer Soledad Library. How may I help you? That's on purpose, and they definitely can help. For people who have holds that they've set to be picked up at Greenfield, we can reroute your holds. We can route them to the bookmobile. We can route them to another branch. We can have them mailed to you. We just route them to library by mail. All those services are free. We are setting up some bookmobile visits. So check our library calendar or give us a call. If you want to be in Greenfield, you want a browsing collection, you want to know when the bookmobile is coming, because we are setting up the bookmobile. We just don't have quite a schedule done yet. Print, scan, and copy is the thing we don't have a way to do other than the bookmobile or an alternate branch. We're working on it. If we find a way, we absolutely will share that. But right now, we don't have a way to do print, scan, fax, or copy in Greenfield right now. So I want to tell you about some other upcoming projects because we have lots of work going on in our libraries. The Big Sur Library is about to get a new entry and front porch. I was hoping this slide would have a date on it today. I don't quite have a date, but I'm fingers crossed it's going to be real soon. That will close the Big Sur branch for about a month because you can't rip the entry off a branch and still have it safe for the public to use. Repairs to our Pajaro Library are underway. If anybody's driven past the beautiful Porter Mansion in Pajaro, it is now a fully wrapped active construction site. We're working on enhancements to the San Lucas Library landscaping. And after Greenfield's done with a roof, they need a repair of their parking lot. And we're going to reorient it to have more ADA compliant parking and electric vehicle parking. The Gonzales Library is getting ready to move into the new Gonzales Community Center built by the city of Gonzales. Right now, we anticipate closing the week of Thanksgiving and then reopening in our new site, date to be determined. There are still many, many factors in play, but we will be closed in Gonzales in our current site after Thanksgiving and be doing similar services as we are with Greenfield, bookmobile, temporary stops, that kind of thing. And of course, we are building new libraries in Bradley and East Garrison, brand new library builds. that should start coming out of the ground next year and be really exciting. For everybody, for any need, bookmobile stops, library by mail, reference via email, online materials, always available to you at all times. You don't have to wait for your branch to close to have these accessible to you. Thank you for giving me a chance to share, and I can answer any questions or send any further information to you.
Hillary, thanks so much for walking us through all of this. You don't know how much you need the library till you don't have it.
That is true. We definitely have a lot of people who enjoy the physical place of a nice branch library. And while we can't be there for the physical place, we hope to make this project happen really quickly. And then our physical place will be much nicer as a result. Like I said, without buckets in the winter catching the rainwater through the roof. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's, nobody wants that. One thing that people may find surprising is the print scan copy services that you provide at the library. And people may not realize what an important asset the library is if you just need a copy of something. And so are people kind of concerned about, you're moving them to the bookmobile, alternate locations? Was that something that people responded to you concerned about?
It is definitely a concern. We know how heavily it is used, especially in communities that do not have a UPS store or a CopyMax or whatever they're called today. In many of the communities we serve, we are the only public print scan fax copy option that's readily available. We have been for 2 weeks tying ourselves up in knots trying to figure out how we could potentially do this in Greenfield. We don't have an answer yet. If we discover an answer, we will add it. We will put it on the website and our staff will know about it. We're working on the same thing for being closed in Gonzales. We don't have an answer yet. We think everything can be figured out. We will keep looking for a way, but it is a huge service in our libraries. Those machines are used a lot. We also are a public fax service. I don't know how many people know how much business is still done by fax machine. The answer is a lot. And we are a place you can come send and receive a fax. There you go.
Well, these are long overdue renovations, but still, we're going to be holding your hand through it, and we really hope everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Us too, knock on wood.
Thank you, Hillary, very much for kind of keeping us updated, and we'll be following your progress.
Thank you.
All right, September is Suicide Prevention Month. This is a very good time for us to speak up and break the silence that often surrounds suicide, but it's also a good time for us all to know what resources are out there for us and the people that we love. There will be 2 suicide prevention resource fairs this month, which is part of that larger effort. We're very pleased to have Kelly Molton. She's the Deputy Director of our County of Monterey Behavioral Health to talk about both the month and the resource fairs. Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us. So yes, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and it's a time for us to raise awareness, reduce stigma, and encourage honest conversations about mental health and suicide. Monterey County Health Behavioral Health is partnered with our Family Service Agency of the Central Coast and are hosting 2 resource fairs. Sandra, if you want to pull up the PowerPoint, we can go ahead and share that out for these group. And really, it's an opportunity for us to connect to our community, to link up resources, and to remind our community partners that even in times of hardship, that you're not alone. There's resources for you. And so, like was mentioned, this year we're hosting 2. One fair is going to be on September 5th in Soledad, and the other September 10th in Salinas. Both resource fairs will be held from 11 to 3 p.m. at those Hartnell College locations, as indicated in our flyers that will be dropped into the chat for folks to be aware of. And we really want to encourage all ages to come. We're going to have an opportunity to share resources. There will be a raffle. There will be some snacks and refreshments, as well as some speakers being able to speak about their experience with mental health and or suicide. So on the screen, you can see, our two locations. We're very happy to be able to partner with Hartnell College, both in Soledad and here in Salinas. Next slide. And then, we also want to make sure that the community is aware of the resources that we have. Obviously, Monterey County Behavioral Health is available for folks of all ages. Also to remind folks, if they're in more urgent need and they need help right now, to feel free to call our community crisis line at 866-615-1060, as well as our 988 number. You can call or text that, especially for folks who maybe are still grappling with stigma and or are more comfortable texting and remaining anonymous when they ask for help. We also wanted to include access to the SAMHSA Suicide Prevention Month toolkit, especially for, schools or other organizations that might want to put stuff out for the month of September. And then, of course, NAMI Monterey County, we have a very robust NAMI here in Monterey County. We're very lucky. And so they also offer support for folks who are looking to be connected. And with that, just a final shout out. We wouldn't be able to do our resource fairs without fantastic partners from the community that show up and provide services for our community members in need. And that concludes the comments, if there's any questions.
Kelly, thanks so much for kind of walking through everything on this. One question that comes up frequently about this issue is the difference between now and the past and the present in terms of accessibility and being comfortable talking about an issue that some people find very uncomfortable. Now we have resource fairs that people can come to and ask questions. Have you seen a lot evolving in the last decade or longer where people don't have to feel awkward in asking maybe what could be a hard question?
Absolutely. I think the more we talk about it, the more we give permission to talk about it. Whether we're talking about it in school systems or, in a media briefing such as this, we're offering opportunities to folks to ask the questions. I also think that, for folks who are newer to asking for help, the option to ask for help anonymously really allows folks to get their questions answered and to get the support without needing to provide a lot of information about themselves. Because for some folks, they really are just trying to figure it out. And so being able to talk to someone, such as a community crisis line or 988, it really gives them the opportunity to talk to someone who's trained, who can then guide them to the necessary next steps, whatever those might be.
Can you talk a little bit about what people can expect at the resource fair? Because again, people might say, I feel really awkward going to this public place with my, something that I'm feeling, and I may want to ask about it. What can people expect to find there?
That's a wonderful question. And so really what folks can expect is welcoming. We gear this towards the whole age range. You'll see balloons, you'll see, raffle prizes. You'll see, booths that have folks sitting there ready with pamphlets and wanting to talk to folks. So it's meant to be non-intimidating. It's meant to be very welcoming. There will be refreshments and stuff like that. And so really it's about having the conversation and building community. So, we do have speakers that will be speaking at all the locations. So, like in Soledad campus is a little bit smaller, of a more intimate gathering, whereas the Salinas is a little bit bigger. But other than that, expect welcoming people who want to talk to folks.
Kelly, thanks so much for sharing all about the resource fair and the resources that if people can't get to the fair, that there are options for them, whatever their issue may be.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. And we hope to hear more about the fair in the weeks to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And now we're circling back on an interesting story. You may recall several weeks ago, there was an alert that went out about wild pigs that were exposed to pesticide bait, and that bait turned their flesh blue and made them unsafe to eat. Well, there is a lot more to the story on this, and we're very pleased to have Zach Mills, who is a biologist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, here to talk about blue pigs and all there is to go with it, including hunter safety. Zach, thanks very much for being here and kind of giving us a broader look at this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Zach Mills. I'm the district wildlife biologist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I work primarily in Monterey and San Benito counties. This report is focused at this point in time to Monterey County, which is the only place we've had this detection at this point in time in my district. Just going to provide a quick summary of the news release. It's had a lot of attention, not necessarily just in the United States, but it's even reached some global outlets. So I'm going to give kind of a high-level overview, and this more specifics onto the rodenticide difascinone, and then just generally our messaging to hunters and anybody who may be encountering some of these animals or animals that have abnormal symptoms. So yeah, with that, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife confirmed the presence of rodenticide difascinone in wild pigs. In March of 2025, I responded to several reports of wild pigs with abnormal blue-colored flesh. Those reports first came in through an urban trapper, but I also had reports from hunters in the same general area. The first round of reports, they had reported it to me, but they had already discarded the remains of the animals. So I put out kind of the alarm to anybody if they saw any of these blue-colored pigs to reach out to me directly as quickly as they could. I got another carcass late March, I believe it was March 26th, 2025, that was subsequently submitted to the UC Davis Animal and Food Safety Laboratory, their pathology lab, where they performed full pathology and difascinone contamination was confirmed. We got those results in May of 2025. As part of the investigation at UC Davis, tissue samples were analyzed for 8 different agents commonly used in rodenticides, and difascinone was the only agent of concern or contaminant of concern that was identified in that pathological analysis. Difascinone is a first-generation anticoagulant rodenticide used to control rodent populations primarily. Like other anticoagulants, it works by inhibiting the vitamin K recycling, disrupting blood clotting of the target animal. Unfortunately, rodenticides sometimes spill over into non-target wildlife, such as carnivores, raptors, scavengers, that may consume the poison bait directly, which is the case of the wild pigs, or they could accumulate indirectly in the case of a carnivore that may eat a rodent that passed away from difascinone. There's still an exposure if it were then to eat the animal that had consumed the difascinone. This can result in secondary poisoning, leading to internal hemorrhage, weakness, and ultimately death in animals that do consume the contaminated baits. Although difascinone tends to bioaccumulate less than second-generation anticoagulants, repeated exposure can still cause significant effects in non-target species and across the food web. One of the more common questions that I get, of course, is why does the meat appear blue? And for anybody who's seen the press releases and different news outlets with the difascinone toxicity, or the blue pig invasion, they're calling it, you'll notice that the blue is really a bright blue, shockingly blue. We're not talking just an off-color blue. We're talking bright, almost blueberry-like blue. Commercial rodenticides are formulated with with dyes, which are usually blue or green, to clearly mark both the bait. So if you grab the rodenticide, oftentimes it's blue, or if you can think of a rodenticide, sometimes they're green as well. But secondarily, it's a signal that affected tissues should not be consumed. So that color, that dye, accumulates in the tissue of the animal that consumes it. In wild pigs that were exposed to difascinone, hunters are going to notice that blue as soon as they open the abdomen to process the animal. It accumulates in the fat tissue that would be right inside the belly. A combination of the dye and potentially internal hemorrhage can also combine to create different colors, but generally it's shockingly blue, and the meat, that should be a clear signal to the harvester that meat should not be consumed. It's a moment to really pause and say, that's an abnormal color, and reach out to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I have a section on the role of hunters in the public, and one thing I want to stress is that the public and hunters are our eyes and our ears in the field. If they do observe wild pigs or other wildlife showing abnormal behaviors, unexplained deaths, or they observe carcasses that have blue or abnormally colored flesh, please report it immediately to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Health Laboratory. These reports are absolutely critical for detecting emerging threats and protecting wildlife, wildlife and for protecting human health. CDFW also emphasizes that rodenticides be deployed safely, responsibly, and only in alignment with local guidelines and regulations. Proper use helps prevent unintended exposure of non-target species, including wildlife and game animals, while still supporting rodent management objectives. I've had a lot of questions as to where this happened, and it's tough to think of a toxin exposure or a contaminant exposure, because it can occur wherever that exposure is. It's not necessarily like a bacterial or viral process that transmits through the population, so we may see this spring up at different locations. At this point in time, it has been generally in the Salinas River corridor, south of Soledad, and I've had a couple reports extending further east toward the foothills of the Gabilan Range. But the issue is it can really pop up anywhere, anytime. It doesn't mean it's confined to that area. It can occur wherever diphacinone exposure is occurring, and it doesn't transmit from pig to pig like a disease process, a traditional disease process when we think bacterial or viral diseases. The last note that I have is protecting California's wildlife and public health requires vigilance from all of us who share the landscape. And together we can certainly reduce risk by following the best practice and reporting these concerning findings in a timely manner.
Zach, thanks very much for walking us a little bit through the history and then where we are now. I have a question about hunter safety. When it comes to people harvesting wild pigs, there's no tag or requirement for doing that. So but as we read about this rodenticide exposure, it could be found in bears or other game animals. How do you get the word out to hunters about what to look for? Because it could be you finding in a bear or something else that might eat this rodenticide.
Right, that's correct. And yeah, I don't want people to get fixated on just pigs, because you're absolutely right. We could see this in any species that target those bait distribution sites. So I think you're very spot on with bears. Geese oftentimes will eat these sites, or eat at these sites. And it's really a collective effort that we have sound messaging that hunters know to stop, pause, freeze when they encounter something bizarre with their harvest. I do think in general state agencies, across the country do a good job of having communication with their hunters, that if they're seeing abnormal behavior, abnormal conditions or symptoms within their animal pre or post harvest, that they have an open line of communication with that state agency to report these findings, especially in migratory birds like we had mentioned, geese, where they're not just residents of California, right? On the next phase of their flight, they may be in Oregon, they may be in Nevada, they may be in Canada. And making sure, I think all state agencies do a good job of making hunters aware that they have a clear line of communication with the state should they have any abnormal findings. But the biggest thing that we can do, as agencies, is make sure we're aware of these things, and we cultivate messaging that allows hunters to reach out to us, right? So I've tried in this landscape to make sure I have one-on-one interactions with hunters as often as I can. I have different orientations for species, and I will build that into messaging for other species. I have an upcoming elk orientation, and I will talk about this in an elk orientation. Even if I'm not quite as concerned, it's important that the hunting community knows about it. So personally, I disseminate this on one-on-one encounters. Obviously, the media has really taken this story and distributed it far and wide. I've seen it, clear through to National Geographic, which is the best thing we can do to share the story so that everybody has access to it and knows to pause if they see things that are abnormal. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I was just thinking hunters get tags and they get licenses to do this, and I didn't know if there's a way to slip in information, when they're getting their tag saying,
right. You're
watch
spot
out for
on with
this.
the challenge of pigs, because as you had mentioned in 2024, pig regulations were changed that there is no longer a tag-based system. It's now a a stamp-based system where pig hunters get a validation, and that allows hunting of pigs. That said, we've certainly had conversations about how to integrate that messaging on a hunting license basis. We do something similar, for example, with chronic wasting disease. We've got a lot of messaging there. With anybody who's buying a deer tag, they know we're on the lookout for chronic wasting disease. They know we're sampling, and they know they can engage with their regional biologist to get those samples. This is fairly new for pigs, so we may see changes like that if it becomes a very prevalent issue. The hope is that it's just a kind of a flare up and a one-time thing in that drainage, and that we can correct it with the outreach that we've already conducted. But if it continues and we see it across taxa, so in more species across a broader geographic area, that's a very logical next step, is to make sure at the purchase of the license, they get that information.
You talk about hunters kind of being eyes and ears on this. You may need their eyes and ears if they see inappropriate use of this rodenticide, because they may be out in the landscape and they may see, I'm not sure exactly what the setup is to get this out there, but you want to get the word out to people who are using the pesticide, probably for all the right reasons, but something is going wrong with it.
You're absolutely right. And yeah, of course, I have concerns that people are broadcasting rodenticides or other contaminants with, recklessly, and yeah, that's a tough situation, because even if everybody's following the same policy, but the pigs are still using the Salinas River drainage, that's a very large area, and pigs, unbeknownst to most, will commute large distances. So just because we got the pigs where they were, that doesn't mean that's the only exposure, or that was the exposure necessarily, because the pigs locally will commute 4, 5, 6, 10 miles from where they bed during the day to where they eat overnight, and they can be moving that. So yeah, that's why I emphasize that it's a very collective action. And if I have reports, I generally work with our team in Sacramento of people incorrectly using rodenticides or broadcasting them, which ultimately trickles down to interacting with the county ag commissioner to help with that process. And I just think, all of us collectively have to keep our eyes and ears to the ground and be ready for these reports, of which, with these news articles, I've received, numerous reports.
Well, so it's happy hunting, but safe hunting and informed hunting.
Yes, absolutely.
In Monterey County. Zach,
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for being here and bringing us up to speed on this. And hopefully we get some news, or actually we get no news, that no more pigs show up in all their blueness.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so very much.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us on the news briefing this week. Our next briefing is next week, and we'll see you then.